Good evening. It is Thursday, December 8th, 2011. Well, on Monday I delivered my dissertation proposal in front of the history department. It seemed to go pretty well, and got a good response. The proposal was approved. Monday I have oral exams, which I'm not worried about. And then after that, I'm 100% dissertation. And boy, let me tell you, I'm really excited about that. Get these things out of the way one step at a time, and still got a tall mountain to climb. But it's just another hurdle that I've completed, and it feels really good. But that's not the subject of today's video blog. What I want to do tonight is address a topic that I've mentioned quite a bit in past video blogs in the last 2 years, but I have not devoted an entire blog to. And what I want to do is break down the left-right paradigm, explain it, and show how it is entirely insufficient for explaining today's problems. That America is in dire need of a paradigm shift. That the left-right paradigm has done immense damage and harm to political discourse in this country. That it's dividing us, and that it's preventing us from uniting behind common goals that need to be accomplished. We don't have a choice. They need to be dealt with. But we can't because we're fighting amongst each other. Tearing down this left-right paradigm, as I will argue in this blog, is the best thing to do. I mean, this is our best shot at tackling these problems. And remember, the left-right terms such as left and right are very recent. They were not used in the 19th century. I mean, what was Thomas Jefferson? Was he left or right? What was Andrew Jackson? Was he left or right? What about William Jennings Bryan and the Populists? What about Abraham Lincoln? Was Abraham Lincoln left or right? I mean, we don't know because those words weren't around. It's a relatively recent phenomenon, and it needs to go. This is the 21st century, not the 20th century, so let's leave behind old 20th century terminology and move into a new century of a more enlightened political discourse. All right, so let's break down this left-right paradigm. What do I mean by left and right? I drew up a very crude diagram here. So let's start with right wing. Well, on the very, very far right, you've got fascism, Mussolini, Hitler. And then on the far left, you have Lenin, Stalin, Mao, communists. In the American system, Democrats consider George W. Bush to be far right, albeit not fascist. And Republicans consider Obama to be far left, albeit not communist. Then Ron Paul. What's Ron Paul? Well, Ron Paul's far right. He's an extremist. And for some, I guess Paul is on the same end of the spectrum as Hitler, which is curious. And then on the far left, Dennis Kucinich. Dennis Kucinich and Ralph Nader, those are extremists. And once again, a very odd pairing there between Kucinich and Nader, and then Stalin and Mao. I'm a bit confused about that. And then, of course, we got guys like Gingrich, who's right-wing, and McCain, who's more moderate right-wing, Clinton, who's more moderate left-wing. So, I contend that there's major problems with that paradigm. Because all of a sudden, we're seeing guys like Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul and Ralph Nader, three guys who are supposed to be on the opposite end of the political spectrum. We find them agreeing on the Patriot Act. we find them, all three, being fierce advocates of the First Amendment, of the Fourth Amendment, fierce critics of the military-industrial complex and the warfare state. All three of them agree that the Federal Reserve is out of control. All three agree that corporate welfare and bailouts is bad policy. All three sympathize with Occupy Wall Street and Tea Party, even if they have some differences with those movements. They sympathize with the sentiment in those movements. All three agree that corruption is endemic in our political system. All three agree that government is not responsive to the people. And yes, their rhetoric is a little different, but they're coming together on so many grounds that, you know, the left-right paradigm says, oh, they're supposed to be polar opposites. How do we explain this paradox? Why are they agreeing on so many issues? If you don't believe me, go on YouTube and type in Kucinich Paul or Nader Paul, and you'll see broadcasts where they come on and they're agreeing on everything. Another paradox with the left-right paradigm. Obama and Bush. They're supposed to be polar opposites. But what do we find? We find Obama continuing the Bush foreign policy and even expanding it, going into even more countries. We find Obama continuing the policy of corporate welfare and bailouts. We find Obama extending the Patriot Act and even strengthening it. Again, the rhetoric is different, but the policy is the same. Another paradox with the left-right paradigm is Hitler and Stalin. Yes, their rhetoric was different. Hitler was a national socialist. He focused on the race and all those things, and communists tended to be more internationalist. But mass murder, obsession with wars and conquest, suppression of the very, very basic liberties that we as human beings strive to hold on to. So, I argue that it is time for a new paradigm. And it's really not even a new paradigm, because this used to be the way people would see things. This used to be the dominant mode of thinking, and some, you know, this isn't my idea by any stretch of the imagination, but you know, others even in the 20th century have thought this way. But this needs to become the dominant way of political thinking. I don't have one word for either side, but on one end you have forced totalitarianism, and on the other end, peace, freedom, and voluntarism. Now at the top there, you've got guys like Stalin and Hitler and Mao. Two sides, I see them as two sides of the same coin. They're totalitarian, they're statist. In this paradigm, they're not opposites. They're on the same end of the spectrum. The rhetoric is a little different. People are like, well, why did communists and fascists hate each other so much? They hated each other so much because of rhetoric and petty differences and you know, the whole idea about racism and nationalism. Okay, but at the end of the day, their policies led to the same thing: totalitarianism and force to the extreme. Below that, and admittedly considerably below that, we need to keep it that way, and I fear that the gap is shortening. You've got guys like Obama and Bush, where again their rhetoric is different, but their policies are so much alike. Now, they're not at the top because we still have free speech in this country. That's why I'm able to make this video blog, and you know, we need to we need to remain grateful for that and defend that. So they're below those top tyrants, but they're still on that side of the spectrum, in my view, in this paradigm. Newt Gingrich and Mitt Romney are also in this corner, and you know, some people will ask me, you know, what if Ron Paul doesn't get the nomination and it's Newt Gingrich? You're not going to vote for Newt Gingrich? No, I'm not going to vote for Newt Gingrich. I disagree with almost everything Newt Gingrich says, and Mitt Romney. Almost everything. The rhetoric, again, is different. He talks about markets and things, but at the end of the day, he still supports the warfare state. He still opposes the Fourth Amendment. He still is an advocate of TARP. He supported TARP, the $700 billion bailout to the banking system. The other end, you've got freedom, peace, voluntarism. Ron Paul's right there at that extreme end. And so maybe Ron Paul is an extremist. He's just an extremist towards the corner of freedom and peace. See, in this paradigm, Ron Paul and Adolf Hitler are not on the same side of the spectrum. They are polar opposites, and you cannot think of a politician who is more opposite of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin than Ron Paul. I mean, literally, even if you don't like Ron Paul, even if you disagree with Ron Paul on a lot of things, there is not a man who is more opposite than those people. So why would we put Ron Paul and Adolf Hitler on the same end of the right side of the spectrum? They're opposite, and this paradigm helps explain that. Above them, you've got guys like Dennis Kucinich, Ralph Nader, even Eugene Debs. Yes, they have socialist solutions for the economy. Now, their brand of socialism is definitely, like they argue, is more responsive to the people and not totalitarian. Now, others will argue that's impossible, but that's beyond the scope of this blog. But when it comes to civil liberties and war, all three of those men, Debs being in the past, support total freedom, total peace. They're patriots. They love this country. They love liberty. They just have some different views on the economy. They would argue that some force is necessary. And if you believe that, that's fine. Again, that's not in the scope of this blog to argue for or against force in the economic sphere. They argue that a little bit of force sometimes is necessary for the common good. And again, so that's why they're above Paul on that spectrum, but they're still on the same side as Paul, and so this paradigm right here explains the apparent paradox of why those individuals are agreeing so much. This paradigm also knows where to put Ivan the Terrible and the pharaohs and the kings in the Dark Ages and and such. They're on the force and totalitarian side. The left-right paradigm can't explain. I mean, what is Louis the 14th? I mean, was Louis the 14th left-wing or right-wing? I mean, maybe someone say he was right-wing. I don't know. This paradigm is clear. Louis the 14th was a totalitarian. He was against freedom. So, I firmly believe that the left-right paradigm, one of the most detrimental effects that it has done to our political discourse and our political ideas in this country, is that it keeps us on a plantation. And let me explain what I mean by that. If you're a Republican, you are told that being against the Patriot Act and being against aggressive wars, not wars of defense, aggressive wars, which constitutes every war we've been in for the last half century. You're told that being against those things is left-wing. That being against corporatism, and by corporatism I mean corporate control of government, that if you're against corporatism, that's left-wing. And you don't want to be left-wing, so you can't be against those things. And so it keeps Republicans on that plantation. Democrats, it does a similar thing for those who identify with Democrats or the left. Criticizing the Federal Reserve is right-wing. Talking about decentralization and localism, such as making the case that we ought to get rid of the Department of Education because education is best done when it's under local control and under the control of teachers and those sort of things. To talk like that, that's right-wing. And you don't want to be right-wing if you're on the left, because right-wing is very scary and it's racist and all those things. So you see what it does? It keeps people it keeps people closed-minded to different ideas. when the reality is some ideas that are traditionally associated with the left are good, and some ideas that are traditionally associated with the right are good, and that, but because we're so caught up in hating each other and opposing each other, we close our mind to new ideas. But this is all changing now, because you've got guys like Dennis Kucinich and Ralph Nader all of a sudden talking about, ending the Fed. Now their alternative is different to Paul's, but the fact that they're talking about this, all of a sudden it's not it's not a right-wing issue anymore. You've got Ron Paul talking to Republicans about the Fourth Amendment and how we shouldn't go around the world, dropping bombs everywhere and starting wars of conquest. So all of a sudden, talking about these things is no longer left-wing. All of a sudden, maybe it is appropriate to talk about these issues. And so this is an unbelievable development, and it makes me very optimistic about the way things are going. And I've been pessimistic in the past, but I will say I feel an intellectual revolution going on. People are thinking about things that they weren't thinking about before, and I firmly believe that this old paradigm, this old 20th century paradigm, is breaking down before our very eyes. And I think there's a lot of reason to be optimistic right now. The one arena where I think the left-right paradigm is still useful, potentially, is on social issues. The right wing is associated with having a more traditional, conservative view on social relations. The left is traditionally associated with bucking tradition and tend to be open to new social ideas. But even then, like Ron Paul believes personally that, marriage should be between a man and a woman, but he says that government should be involved in marriage in the first place. It's not government's role to dictate, to give marriage licenses and such, and so he wouldn't have the state move in and prevent two individuals of the same sex getting married. So that's where the bridge can be crossed. But so maybe it is useful in that respect. But beyond that, the left-right paradigm is, in my view, completely useless. And that brings me to this next topic, and that's Occupy Wall Street in the Tea Party, especially the libertarian element in the Tea Party. Let me say this about Occupy. I don't agree with Occupy and everything, but I absolutely love the movement. I think it's great. I think it's very healthy, and I think it's very American that people are getting off their seats and actually doing something, and going out and exercising their right to assembly and their right to free speech. That's amazing, and I think Occupy has been great for this country. Again, I don't agree with it on everything, but then again, it's not a monolithic movement. Generally, I would say Occupy is anti-corporatism, anti-corruption, and against elite and corporate control of government. I agree with that 100%. Now there are idiots in Occupy. There's a few people who strut around talking about communism. Now, that's stupid. All right. Anytime you get a group of people together, a populist group, you're going to have a few individuals saying or doing stupid things, and it's the same with the Tea Party. There are some idiots in the Tea Party, as we all know. There's a few Tea Partiers who hate Obama because he's black. That's unfortunate. Is that the majority? No, I do not believe that whatsoever. And I think Herman Cain doing well is evidence of that. And I did not like Herman Cain, but that's another topic. But again, the Tea Party is not monolithic either, like Occupy Wall Street. You go to a Tea Party rally and you're going to see some anti-war signs. Believe me, I've been to one, and I need to go to an Occupy one of these days. But I saw anti-war signs. I saw pro-civil liberty signs. I saw anti-Fed signs. It's just the media doesn't show those images, so we get a false sense of what it is. Again, you can't prevent some of the idiots in both groups. I believe that the Occupy movement and the Tea Party, especially the libertarian element in the Tea Party, but the Tea Party in general, that they are not that different. I think they have common grievances and reason to have grievances. And I think they both know that something is very wrong with the direction that we are headed in. And so the key to getting the ship turned around is for Occupy and the Tea Party, for Occupy and libertarians to understand that they have a lot in common, despite differences, and that they have to unite. Especially Occupy and the libertarian movement must unite, and the libertarian movement's going really strong right now. Look at Ron Paul's poll numbers. He's at about 20%, and he's got a lot of independent support, so that's a growing movement too. If we can unite. Now, the left-right paradigm says that's impossible. You can't unite because you're polar opposites. And again, I contend that that's just not the case, that they are not polar opposites. Now, culturally, they might be different. Culturally, they are different. But, that's okay. Diversity is good. They agree. What does Occupy and the libertarians agree on? Well, they agree that corporate welfare is bad. They agree that bailouts are bad. They agree that the government is corrupt and unresponsive to the people. Libertarians and occupiers agree that the drug war needs to be ended. They agree that the wars need to be ended. The wars! That's the most important thing to unite on. And they agree that the Patriot Act is unconstitutional and that we need a Fourth Amendment. And they agree on the Bill of Rights. See, so there's a lot of agreement here. We must unite. And that's what needs to happen. And if libertarians and the Occupy movement, and even the Tea Party, unite behind these common goals, that is going to scare the living daylights out of the establishment. The Republican establishment and the Democratic establishment. If we got together and conceded, we have some differences. We don't agree on some things. But we do agree on these things. And we do agree that government must be more responsive to the people. So let's get together and get these common goals accomplished. Let's unite behind a common agenda on these things that we can agree on. Let's restore the Bill of Rights. Let's end corporatism and corporate control of government and corporate welfare and corporate bailouts. Let's end the private Federal Reserve and recognize that this is what literally caused the bloated financial sector that is behind all of our economic problems today. Now, beyond that, we might disagree on what should replace the Federal Reserve, but let's end that thing. I mean, and we can unite on that. But most importantly, we have to end the wars. The wars are killing this nation, and if you look at every empire falls because it stretches itself out militarily. And the great thing is Republicans are waking up to this. And because of the Ron Paul movement. And Democrats are becoming more and more upset with Obama for continuing the wars. The wars must end. We can't do it anymore in Iran. We cannot go to war with Iran. That must be avoided at all costs. So let's stop infighting. Let's stop fighting amongst each other and get these common goals accomplished. Then we can have a debate about the things we disagree on. Okay? Because if we keep playing into these games of left and right and fighting amongst each other, meanwhile, the system is standing above us and nothing's being done about it because we're busy fighting against each other. It's divide and conquer. That's what the English colonists did with not just the English, but the French and Spanish colonists did with the Indians when they came to the New World. They got the various Indian tribes fighting amongst each other, and so the Indians could not unite behind the common goal of, hey, these guys are violating, our right to this land and our right to our property and these sort of things. Even if they didn't word it quite that way, that's what it was. They couldn't unite because the tribes were fighting against each other, and it's a similar sort of thing going on now. We're fighting amongst each other as a people because of the stupid left-right paradigm, and we're not recognizing that, hey, there's a big problem that we can get accomplished, but only if we join together. And the key is Ron Paul. And you might disagree if you were watching this video, and you might disagree with Ron Paul on some economic issues, okay? And that's fine. We recognize that. But the mere fact that he is against the wars and against corporate control of government and against all of this corruption, and that he's honest and has integrity, you have to vote for him. Put aside your differences. Like I said, look, if Dennis Kucinich or Ralph Nader were running and they were at about 20% in the polls right now, and there wasn't an equivalent on the libertarian side, I would vote for that person. Yes, I would say I disagree with Ralph Nader on economic issues, but I agree with him 100% on this and this and this and this. So I'm going to vote for him. I'll put aside my difference, and I'm going to vote for him. What would really shake up this system, and this would be incredible, if Ron Paul doesn't get the nomination, the Republican nomination, and he still might, because I think he's going to win Iowa, and that will really shake things up. But if he doesn't get it, imagine if Ron Paul teamed up with Dennis Kucinich or a guy like him on a third-party ticket. That would just smash the left-right paradigm to pieces. Because here are these guys who are supposed to be complete opposites of each other running on the same ticket. It would discredit that entire paradigm. And that's what we need in this country. And if we can do that, boy, the sky's the limit. And we could really accomplish some great things in this country. So let's get beyond our differences, because there are some bigger problems that we can agree on right now that can be done. But only if we recognize that and unite. All right. I got a little riled up there at the end, but it's an important subject, and so the message needs to get out there. Anyway, this is probably my last blog until 2012, so have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, and I look forward to speaking to you in the year 2012. Have a good one. Bye.